we've got some updates. Apparently, there was a deal with Democrats gave to Joe Manchin to get this stimulus package done, get the stimulus checks for seniors done, and get even those monthly check for families done as well. Everything was set to go down. They were unlike and intellect to get this deal done. And then Joe Manchin completely blew it up. So let's discuss the details what exactly this deal was and what we expected to happen next. Could this deal potentially be revived? And now people are speculating that potentially this deal can be revived. But before we talk about that, let's do a quick update on daily trending news. Here are a lot of headlines saying the grocery stores still have empty shelves, and the supply chain disruptions, Omicron and winter storms. So when we put all these things together, people are getting sick, people are calling off, and Democrats are saying that they are trying to tackle inflation, but at the same time approve more stimulus. So they are trying to thread the needle where they are giving people money to help deal with inflation, but they're not causing more inflation as it is. And a lot of experts think that the best way to do that is to make sure you only give the stimulus to people who are slightly lower income. Like if you make less than 40 grand per year, about that really kind of could cause inflation, but because then you are using the extra stimulus to buy things you really don't need. It kind of becomes like discretionary income, which could lead to inflation. Also, trending in the news is that the fact that Dr. Fauci just went at it with the Senator Rand Paul and called him out for basically using Fauci as scapegoat to try and raise money for his own campaigns. Let's talk about this deal that Democrats offered Joe Manchin to get the stimulus package done. Why that deal broke down? That was thought to be a deal that was going to get the package done. Why that broken down? And why we think this could potentially be revived. So, this article is titled, Senate Democrats Offered Manchin Huge Compromise on Check to Parents. That Manchin blew it up and they don't know why. So, Senate Democrats thought that Manchin had ultimately dropped his demands for a work requirement on the Biden Child Tax Credit. That's referring to the fact that his one-to monthly stimulus payment for kids, that monthly child tax credit, to have requirements that parents actually have to work. Currently, you literally don't have to work for an hour a year and you still get that monthly credit. But the problem that Democrats have what that is, then the effect on the poverty, that it has actually becomes greatly diminished. And we've all seen that the monthly stimulus payments for kids cut childhood poverty almost in half. But if you take that away from people who don't work at all, and you are actually taking it away from people who need it the most, and those effects on the poverty lowering actually become very diminished. So that became an issue, and then at very last minute, he said he's not going to do the deal, and Senate Democrats actually cut a deal with him, offering him very strong compromise. So Democrats were basically trying to get Joe Manchin not to do that. He compromised. They offered Joe Manchin the deal they offered him was to cut extension of these monthly payments from 3 years to only 1 year. That was a big compromise that they offered Joe Manchin instead of doing this for 3 years, which originally was going to be 10 years. They are doing this for 3 years. we just gonna do it for 1 year. And that was a big deal that they offered Joe Manchin, and that's where a deal that they thought was actually going to get it done. They thought if we lower it to 1 year, we will see how the program goes. If it goes, we continue extending it. And if it doesn't go, then we can just cut it at the end of that year. Experts thought and Democrats thought that was truly going to be enough to get Joe Manchin on board. Unfortunately, Joe Manchin then exploded. He went up the rails. That's where the next day actually, when he went out and held those interviews saying that he was done. He wasn't doing the package anymore. He was completely foaming over the fact that something leaked about Joe Manchin saying that West Virginians could use the stolen money on drugs, and he always supported the tax credit, but said he wanted it to still only go to families who have a jobs. So that was really then negotiations broken down. So experts are saying, can they tell Joe Manchin, we are only going to do it for 1 year, and will that be enough to get Joe Manchin on board? And will that be enough to leave enough funding left over to still do the stimulus checks for seniors? In this community and on this channel, our main priority is taking care of seniors, taking care of those who are disabled, and taking care of people who have to pay the taxes their entire lives and deserve to help more than anyone else. That was really what pushed Joe Manchin over the edge. So this November, they are going to have the seat up for election in both of the House and the Senate. And the problem that happens is now that they gave those monthly stimulus checks for a year. If they take those away right before the election, that could potentially vote really so bad for Democrats in these midterms, and they could lose control of both the House and the Senate, which could leave President Biden as sitting duck, basically not getting anything done for his last 2 years. So as the stands, honestly, Democrats are going to lose both chambers anyway. So they are really trying to find a way to do something extremely to try and win these elections. And for some reason, they are focusing on voting rights. Republicans are trying to do the same thing for themselves, but at the end of the day, what they should be doing is helping American people like do what truthfully helped American people. Colors were 5.9%. Well, now we have inflation at 7%. And so basically, you are getting a negative color of the negative 1.1% because you got 5.9%. But then inflation was 7%. So really, your purchasing power from your benefits are 1.1% less. You actually got a decrease in benefits based off of inflation. We've been talking about politics, what's happening with the economy. You kind of get sent for these things, right? You kind of when you got your figure on the plus on these negotiations and what's going on with the economy, you get a good idea of what's realistic. And to be honest with you, this deal that they offered Joe Manchin, I don't think is going to come back as far as just lowering it to 1 year of monthly checks for families. What I think is going to ultimately happen is they are either going to have to completely take it off, or they are going to have to lower the account back to what it was before. I believe the tax credit was $2,000 before, so they could lower that to $1,000. Give families like $150 per month. If you have 3 kids, you are still getting $450 per month. That's way more than seniors have gotten, so I think that's it realistic. Joe Manchin is happy, families are happy, everyone is happy. Then we have more money left over for seniors to do their stimulus check for seniors. And honestly, when you think about it, and what they should be doing is using that extra leftover money for monthly checks and giving it to seniors monthly. That's where original plan, right? $200 per month until the pandemic was over for minimum for 2 years. So why can't we do that for seniors, guys? It makes absolutely no sense. So they could do things like more stimulus checks for seniors, or even social security changes, which we had to be fighting for so long, And we've been fighting for social security benefits for like a year and a half at this point. I mean, quite honestly, it's getting ridiculous. John Biden in this point, all he's talking about is voting rights. When really, if you want the seniors to vote, giving them what you promised. Like seniors, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure voting rights is important, but I mean, what's going to get your vote for Biden voting rights reform, social security increases, and SSI, SSDI increases, which President Biden promised. In any case, these filibuster changes really are not just for voting reform. It also could have impact on the stimulus and social security changes, because if they change filibuster, this could allow Democrats to do multiple small packages, and again, it could pave the way. It couldn't guarantee things, but it could pave the way to allow Democrats to do these things with simple majority of the 51 votes. If Democrats want to increase social security benefits, they have to get 60 votes, which means it just ends up being filibustered now. If they could change the filibuster rule, and they could reduce the qualifying amount for vote on that to be 51, and that could allow them to do it without single Republican vote, just like they've been doing these stimulus packages. And of course, they could still have to get Joe Manchin on board, and that could be the two tests here, folks, because Joe Manchin has said multiple times he supports the increasing benefits. The fact that Chuck Schumer is saying they are going to try and change the filibuster on January 17th to allow more legislation to get done more easily.